Alright, so I'm going to start off today with one of Tom's questions. And so what Tom is looking for is Tom is wanting to have a way to look for bars with a certain length wick. Alright, so I've circled this bar right here that has a really long wick. So there's a couple of ways that we can look for these wicks, or I should say there's a couple of ways we can measure these wicks. So we can measure these wicks in either ticks, just a fixed tick value, a tick length, or we can look for these wicks in as a percentage or as a ratio to the total length of the bar. So if we took the total length of the bar like so, right, we can measure the total length of the bar, and then we can check to make sure that the wick is a certain percentage of that length of the bar. So that's what I'll start off with. And then so for anybody new in the room, if I want to add BloodHound to my chart, bring up my indicator window, and I'm going to jump down to the S's. So I can see down here on the S's there's SI BloodHound, so that's how we put BloodHound on our chart. And just add it to the chart and click OK. And after that, you'll see there's a button up here, this empty template, and this pull down menu for the logic boards, logic templates. And so to open up BloodHound, I can just click on this button on the top of the chart, and it takes me into the BloodHound interface. So I'm going to start working directly on the logic board here. So I'll give this a name. Let's see. Just give it something simple. And I'll give my BloodHound system a name as well. Let's name the file. Alright, just going to scroll down to last week's and just change the date here. Alright, so the way that we're going to find these wicks is we're going to use the comparison solver. Right, so essentially we're going to be comparing the opening price to the low of the bar, or for an up bar. But if the bar's if it's a down bar, say we have a down bar here, then we would be, there's a good example. If it's a down bar, then we would be comparing the high price to the opening price of the bar. So I'll start off using a comparison solver. And we'll connect that in. And so we're going to be comparing prices here. So to get the price data of the bar, we have an indicator called SI Chameleon. So I'm going to jump down to Chameleon. So it's right underneath the BloodHound. So it starts with SI Chameleon. So I'll add that down here to the bottom, so I can just double click on it and add it down to the bottom. And you can see I have all of these price points, all of these prices that NinjaTrader calculates. And so I'm going to start off with the opening price. So for either direction, so if we're looking for a wick on an up bar, or if we're looking for a wick on a down bar, we're going to start with the opening price. So I'm going to check the long and the short column for the opening price. And then down here in indicator B, that will be either our low price of the bar or our high price of the bar. So I'll move this over here. And I'll make the wicks a little thicker so you guys can see them a little easier. Alright, there we go. Alright, so indicator A is representing the opening price of the bar, and indicator B is going to represent the high or the low of the bar. So I need to add SI chameleon in here again. And now let's see. So if we're analyzing the wick for an up bar, I guess in this case I'll generate a long signal. And so if we're analyzing the wick on a down bar, I'll generate a short signal. We're going to use the long column for the low price, and the high price we're going to use the short column, since we're going to use the high of the bar to generate a short signal for a down bar. Click OK. And now next, to isolate, or I should say to find certain length wicks, we can use this large amount to say, so let's say we want to find bars that have at least a 10 tick wick on them. And let me stretch this out here a little bit. Alright, you'll notice in the descriptions down here, right, it says A greater than B by 0 ticks or more. You know, sometimes these don't update automatically, so to get this value here to update, you can just click off and click back onto the solver again, and so now you can see this updated. And let me stretch this out. So now you can see we have this value of A greater than B by 10 ticks. And we also have A greater than B by 0 ticks. So we're not interested in finding wicks that are 0 ticks. So we're going to set this to 0. Right, set the long output to 0. And the same thing goes for the short output down here. Right, so we have A less than B by 10 ticks or more. And then we have A less than B by 0 ticks. So we want to get rid of the 0 ticks. So now, as we look at this, we can see this wick here that we have circled, it has a wick of 10 ticks or greater. So every time we see a green bar, we have a wick of 10 ticks or greater. Now you can see it's not always working. So we need to build in some filters. So look, you see how this down bar here got marked long, as if it was an up bar with a long wick. So we need to find a way to filter this bar out, and we also need to find a way to filter this bar out. So this reversal bar up got marked, with the short condition, even though there's no wick on it. An easy way to do that, I think I can just use the bar direction here. So let's just connect both of these together using an AND node. And there we go. That cleaned it up quite a bit. So we can see now that all the bars that have a wick of 10 ticks or more are being determined, or being marked, basically. Let's see here. I think this, yeah, okay. So let me just look at this bar right here. I think this bar right here, I'll put a green arrow. I think this bar has a wick of 8 ticks. So let me just take a quick look. Yes. Yep. So this wick here is 8 ticks long. And we can see that we're getting a signal here on this bar. And if I look at the BloodHound output, let me scroll this over. So you see how the flag here, it says 0.8. So that's telling me that this wick is 8 ticks long, versus, like if I go forward on the chart, you can see how the output here, this short output is 1. So that's telling me that this wick is 10 ticks or more. Let's see, let's measure this. And yeah, so this is a 12 tick wick. This wick is 12 ticks. So let's go back to this wick here that's only 8 ticks long. Right, and the reason why we got a signal in this wick that's 8 ticks long is because of the fuzzy logic part. Remember, so our threshold is set at 0.8. So if I go in and change the threshold, it would eliminate that. So that's kind of like one easy way to do this. So if I close up BloodHound, the way I can change this threshold level here is I can just open up the indicator window, and I can change my threshold. I can change it to something like 0.99. Right. And if I click OK, now we can see this bar is no longer being marked, and that's because you can see now, see the threshold line is essentially at 1, right? It's at 0.99. So now I use the threshold to make sure that we're only getting a signaling condition when the wick is 8 ticks or more. And let me see if I can find a way to make that solver only show 10 tick wicks with the standard threshold of 0.8. So I'll set my threshold back. All right. Go back to the logic board. All right, so back to this comparison solver. So I believe, let's see, if I put this small amount to 10 ticks, and there we go. So you notice how the output got cleaned up. It got rid of the analog type of an output, the fuzzy logic output. So if we look at the description now, let me stretch this out. So the way I got rid of that analog output is, let's read the description of the column now. So now it says A greater than B by 10 ticks. We set it to 0. So there's no interpolation now. So if the wick is 10 ticks or less, the output's going to be 0. And now, if the wick is going to be 10 ticks or more, then we get an output of 1. So setting this small amount to 10 got rid of that fuzzy logic type of an output. So let me set this back to 0 ticks again, just to show you one more time. All right. So you can see that with BloodHound's fuzzy logic, you'll notice the output here. The output, if you look closely, the amount of the output is matching the size of the wick. So if we look at this bar here, right, I believe it has, yeah, it has a 2-tick wick on it, and we can see BloodHound's output. Yeah, let me slide this over. We can see BloodHound's output is 0.2. Now if I take a look at the next bar over, this bar here has a wick of 4 ticks, and we can see BloodHound's output is 0.4. So we can see the fuzzy, the output of this solver, right, is using the fuzzy logic, and which is matching the length of the wick. And the way that fuzzy logic is working is that BloodHound is creating a ratio between 0 ticks and 10 ticks, of this wick length. So what this solver really is looking at is it's taking the opening price. So remember, we put the opening price in indicator A, and then for these down bars we use the high price. So it's comparing the opening price to the high price. So indicator B represents the high price of the bar, and it's creating a ratio between 0 ticks and 10 ticks. So it's measuring the length of this wick and creating a ratio between 10 ticks and 0 ticks, and that ratio is what we see on the output for this solver. So that's kind of in a nutshell how the fuzzy logic part works. And so if I want to kill the fuzzy logic part, what I can do is make sure that there is no ratio being calculated. So if I put 10 ticks in here, then there is no distance between 10 ticks and 10 ticks. So therefore that kind of kills that ratio calculation. And actually, let me back up here. So if I put this back to 0, and I need to click off the solver to update this parameter. So once again, so back to the fuzzy logic, right? The fuzzy logic, this output here, this analog outlook, right? It's also being, the ratio is also being determined from an output of 0 to an output of 1, right? So an output of 0 is at 0 ticks, and we get an output of 1 when the wick gets to 10 ticks. So if we set this output parameter to 10, right, by changing the small amount, I can change the small amount here, and I need to update that, so I'll just click on off the solver again. So now if we read these outputs here, so when we're at 10 ticks, the output equals 0, but then when we're at 10 ticks or more, the output equals 1. Right, so you can see that effectively this kind of killed that ratio calculation, because there is no distance between 10 ticks to 10 ticks. So therefore there's no ratio output from 0 to 1. So that's how we were able to kind of kill that fuzzy logic calculation. And so now what we're seeing on the chart is wicks that are 10 ticks or more, and that's it. So it kind of gives a nice clean digital type of look to it. Alright, so that was like part A of Tom's question. And Tom also wanted to know, how can you look for wicks based on a percentage, like on a percentage base? So we can look for wicks that are, say, like 50% of the whole candle. So we want the wick to be 50% of the candle or more, or greater. So if we want to do that, let's see, I think, yeah, so the candles that I already have circled here definitely have wicks that are 50% of the body of the whole candle or more. So those ought to show up. Let's see, actually, before I move on to part B, I should name my solver here. Let's see, so how about we'll call this a 10 tick wick comparison. So I like to kind of shorten up this name as reasonably as possible without it being too cryptic. So that way if I come back to it a month later, at least when I read this name, it'll make some sense to me. So there we go. I think that's a decent name for this comparison solver. So it tells me it's looking for a 10 tick wick. Alright, so for part B, basically we're looking for wicks again, but we're going to look for them using a percentage or a ratio instead of a fixed tick amount. So we'll take a look at this, and I'll start off by naming the solver first. So we'll find a 50% wick on this one. Alright, and so we're going to set indicator A and indicator B up the same way. So indicator A is going to be our opening price. Chameleon again, and what I'm doing is I'm just double clicking on chameleon, which then drops it down here to the selected indicator that we're using, or you can click the add button as well. Alright, and then I just need to make sure that I'm using the opening price, and next I'll set up the high and the low price of the wick. So I'll jump down to SI Chameleon, and let's see, we're using the low of the wick to generate a long signal, and we're using the high of the wick to generate a short signal. And so instead of using ticks, what we're going to use is the ATR function. So what the ATR does is the ATR measures the high of the bar to the low of the bar. In other words, the ATR, right, is measuring the high of the bar here down to the low of the bar. So it's measuring the total length of the bar. So with this ATR function, we know how long the bar is, and so that tells us, that kind of creates a 100% ratio of the bar. So an ATR with a period of 1 essentially is just telling us the length of just that one bar. So it's not really creating an average true range anymore. It's just telling us the true range of just one bar, of just this one bar. So it's not averaging anymore if we set the period to 1. And now with the value, right, we can put in decimal values. So if I wanted to look for 50% of the bar, I could put in 0.5. So if I wanted to look for a measurement of the measurement of the whole bar, so the total length of this bar that we're looking at, the total length is going to be 1, or 100%. So the ATR is essentially kind of taking the length of the bar, as measured in ticks, and converting it to a ratio or a percentage base. So now with an ATR period of 1, the length of this bar is now essentially 100%. So if I know the length of the bar, I can start looking for a wick that's 50% of the bar by putting in, 0.5 for 50%. And so the next step that I need to do is, remember, we had to remove some of these outputs here. So we're interested in when A is greater than B by 50% or 0.5 of the ATR. But we're not interested in finding wicks that are 0 ticks in length. So we're going to set this to 0. And the same thing for the short output. We want to get rid of this 0 ticks length. So we'll set that to 0. And once again, to kind of really make sense of the output here, we need to use this bar direction to kind of clean out, to kind of filter out some of these long outputs from short outputs. So let me grab another AND node here, and I'll just connect this bar direction down here to the AND node, connect up this comparison solver, and let's take a look at the output. Okay. Let me stretch my chart out here, and we'll take a look at some of these. So clearly, this bar here, let me use a rectangle. So visually we can see this bar has a wick of 50%. This one's a little questionable. It looks like the body is actually longer than the wick, and so the wick is 2 ticks, but the body is 3 ticks. Yeah. So so this wick is not 50%, it's less than 50%. We'll get back to that in a moment. If we look at this candle here, that wick is more than 50%. This candle looks good. That wick looks like it's more than 50%. Right, so I think we have a body here. The body is 1 tick, and the wick is 2 ticks, so we're good there. Let's take a look at this guy. So the wick is 3 ticks long, and the body is 3 ticks long. Yep. So the wick is exactly 50% of the body in this guy. So let's go back to this one here, where the wick is only 2 ticks, but the body is 3 ticks. So the wick is just under 50% of the total length of the bar. And if we look at BloodHound's output here, look at the output here. Right, our output is not at 1. Our output looks like it's at 0.8. Let's take a look. Yeah, so I can, looking at the flag here, the output is at 0.8. So once again, our fuzzy logic kind of gave us allowed this condition to get through because of the fuzzy logic. So we'll work on eliminating that fuzzy logic. So we can use the same process that we did with this other solver over here. So remember, with this other solver, we just put 10 ticks in the large amount, and we put 10 ticks in the small amount. And so we can do the same thing with this other comparison solver. We can just set up our small amount to eliminate that ratio comparison. Right, so I will set this over to an ATR, right, change the period down to 1, and then set the value to 0.5, and there we go, voila. So I got rid of the fuzzy logic output. You see how now the chart looks nice and clean with this digital output. And it also got rid of that signal here that we had here on this bar with a 2-tick wick. So that cleaned that up there. Yeah, I believe that takes care of Tom's question. Oh, yeah, so Tom is asking about a setting, a strategy setting, where you can close a position out, you know, like so many seconds before the market closes. So Tom wanted to kind of go over some other ways or to close out your trades by the end of the market or before the market closes. So so the simple way to do this is to use our time session solver. I'm going to switch over to like a minute chart here. Alright, we're on a minute chart now, and let me scroll back to yesterday's closing time for the market. Alright, I'll mark the closing time of the market. So in my time zone it closes at 2 o'clock. Alright, so there's the closing bar right there. And so there is a tips and tricks video on this, on using the time session solver. So let's see. I'm gonna make a new logic template to build this into. So I'll click on new, and this will be like I'll call this the end of day exit, right? And I'll drop a time session solver in here. Connect that up. Now right now my time session solver is set to, it defaulted to the 24/7 one. So I'm going to go in here and find a custom one. Well, maybe not a custom. Well, let's see if I have some custom ones in here. I do have a bunch of custom ones in here, but let's see, I think what I'll use is just the regular trading hours. Let's see, so if we're doing futures, let's see, I'll use the CME. There we go. CME, the US Index Futures, regular trading hours. And, well, so we can see this actually shows the true closing time of the market, which is, you know, 15 minutes after the pit stops trading. So, you know, basically your brokers want you out by 3 p.m. And this is Central Time. So 3 p.m. Central Time, right? The market, your broker typically wants you out, and 15 minutes. And basically, the floor guys have 15 minutes to kind of clear stuff up. You know, but there shouldn't really be any active trading going on. So if I want to, so really I kind of need to make a custom time session to get me out before the market technically closes here. So, so let's see. So I will make a copy of this. Let's see. Alright, so come up with some kind of name, and I'm going to delete all those. So here's kind of a shortcut in using, right, this is, remember, this is NinjaTrader's Session Manager. So I'll take a shortcut here. I deleted Tuesday through Friday, and let's see what I'm going to do is I'll set this to exit us out 1 minute early. So you can see the Session Manager works in 1 minute increments. They don't go into seconds yet. So I can set this time solver so that so that it turns off 1 minute before the market closes. Let's see. So there's the that's the market open, and I need to. Okay, so after I get my Monday time set, you can right click on this, and it is right here. It says add Monday through Friday, so it adds the rest of the days automatically for you. So there, I'm done. Now I can save this and click OK, and let's see. Oh, you know what? I marked 2 a.m., not 2 p.m. So let me delete this. Let me scroll back a little further into yesterday. And there we go. So I'm going to mark the bar again. Alright, so as we look at this time session solver, right, we can see the way we can see that its output, right, it's going to give us a long and short output during the trading hours, or during that time session, that custom one that I just made, right? So if I scroll forward, there we go. So now there's 7:30. Right, so it turns on at 7:30 my time, which is when the market opens. Right, so we're getting this output, and then of course it turns off 1 minute before the market closes. So there we go, 1 minute before the market closes. So the way this time session solver is set up right now is it could be used to only allow your system to take trades during the market hours, right? So your system could only place new orders or execute trades during the regular trading hours. And so what you could do, what you would want to do is, if you want to use the time session solver as a filter, you would just use an AND node, connect your AND node right to the result node, and then the rest of your system would plug into this AND node here. And this would filter out your signals so that you only get trade signals during the trading day. Right? However, if we want to use this to exit trades, so we're actually building a template here, to exit trades at the end of the day to make sure we don't have any open positions. What we can do is we can reverse this. So you can see the output here. We have two outputs. So when it's in session, we have an output of 1. So we'll set this to 0. And when it's not in session, we'll set the output to 1 there. So now you can see how it flipped the outputs there. So now this solver is giving us an output 1 minute before the market closes. And so we could use this in Raven to close out 1 minute before the market closes. Now keep in mind, if we're using non-time-based bars, you know, you're going to get some different results. So let's switch this over to, we'll say like I'll just use a regular Renko. Let's see, we're on oil, so I'll use a 5-brick Renko. That ought to work good. And let's see here. So this bar, I'll mark it here with an arrow. Now, so this bar closed at 2:42. So essentially, 2:42. So if we were using a Renko, you know, on this particular day, you know, this time session solver would put us flat at 2:42 and 43 seconds. So, you know, it would close us out of the market a little premature, you know, more than just 1 minute, and that's, you know, because of the nature of a Renko bar. So, so just keep that in mind, right? If you're using non-time-based bars, that may happen for you. So, and so you're probably thinking, well, you know, what if we add a chart here, a 1 minute chart, right? So I added a 1 minute chart to my system, and I put this time session solver down on my 1 minute chart like this. Well, we'll take a look at what happens. So if I look at the logic template now, right, I can see this time session solver is now it's on the 1 minute chart. So you can see the little text here telling you what chart that this solver belongs to. And since I added an additional time frame to the BloodHound system, we have to refresh the chart to load that 1 minute data into BloodHound. So I'll just hit F5, reload the chart. And there, so you'll notice that really nothing changed. And that's because of the way NinjaTrader synchronizes bars, right? So since these Renko bars are not time-based anymore, right, you have to wait for the Renko bar to close before you can go and look at the 1 minute chart. So this kind of gets a little in depth when you start working with Renko charts and 1 minute charts and trying to get those to synchronize across. So just something to be mindful of. Yeah, so Sandra's bringing up a good point. You know, in NinjaTrader's options window. So if I bring up the control center, go to tools, go to options, and let's see, go to strategy. No, it's not strategy. Let's see, I forgot, where is it? Miscellaneous. There we go. There is in here, there's a time to flatten. So let's see, if I put 2, actually for me, let's put 1:15. 7:59, 30 seconds, PM. Bingo. So I could set that, right? And so that basically, this is a NinjaTrader setting, you know, so this will flatten out everything, anything that NinjaTrader has open gets flattened out. You know, all those positions. NinjaTrader's back end will essentially, it'll check, you know, it'll be looking at your position tab here, so that, you know, so anything that shows up in your positions tab gets flattened out that way. So that is probably the best way there, Tom, to make sure that everything's getting flattened out. So it's a great suggestion there by Sandra. So Asif is asking, can you add time in SI Raven strategies for loading or for trading, for example, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 9:45 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Yes, so let me put this on a simple 5-minute chart. So I'll draw on the chart here some of these time frames that Asif is looking for. So, and I'm going to reverse the outputs again here, set them kind of back to normal. Alright, so let's see. Asif wants to trade from 7 to 9. There we go. There's this trading period. And then from, let's see, 9:45 to 11:30. Alright, in that time period there. Yeah, so all we need are just 2 time session solvers. So, how about if, let me make a new logic template to build this into. So, let's see, I'll just call this 2 morning trade times. And I'm going to add 2 time session solvers here. So I guess I'll call this like my first time session. Call this one my second time session. Alright, and I'll connect up this first one here. And I'll have to go in here and build a custom time session. Let me scroll the chart back a little bit there. So let's see if I already have something pre-built, possibly. Let's see, first 2 hours. Oh, I'll just go and make some real quick. Alright, there's 7 to 9. Add Monday through Friday. And, oops, I should have made a copy first. Let's see, make a copy. So I'll call this 7 to 9. let's see, morning. Alright, I'll save that. I'll make a copy of this and call it 9:45 to 11:30 morning. Okay. So remember, I'm working in the first time session solver, which is our first time. So I need to switch this back to the first morning session, which is 7 to 9 in the morning. I can click OK, and oh, I must have said something wrong here. Oh, yep. Hold on, let me cancel that and redo this. So I just didn't save it first. I didn't save it properly the first time. All right, there we go. 7 to 9 a.m. and let's see. Oh, yeah, this is on Central Time. This is set to Central Time. So I need to modify it for my time zone. I need to change it to, let's see, 6 to 8 o'clock. Or I could have just changed the time zone as well. All right, so let me add Monday. Let me add Monday through Friday. Save this, and there we go. And I'm still getting my time zones mixed up here. All right, let's go and fix this again real quick. Let's see. And Alright, so I'm setting it up from 7 to 9 on my time zone. Save this. And there we go. Finally. Alright, I got it. Alright, so there's our first time zone. Now, let's work on this other one. And I'll set this to Mountain Time as well. That way, make sure the time zones are correct. All right, save that. And there we go. So now we have an output during the correct time zones. So what we'll do is join both of these together with an OR node. Like so. And there you go. So this, right, so these time session solvers, right, would create a permissive with the rest of your system to allow trade signals through. So what the next step would be is you would have to use an AND node and essentially right, connect the rest of your trading system in to this AND node. And that way signals would only get through during these time zones here, during these times here. All right, so let's see, Sif, that answers your question. And Marcy, this is kind of the same thing. So that Marcy, this kind of addresses your question too. So Marcy is asking, could a time solver be used to stop trading 5 minutes before 5 minutes before news, and turn back on 5 minutes after news? So you would just use the same type of setup here, Marcy. You would create yourself some custom time sessions, and create a couple of custom time sessions, and just block out that 10-minute period, right? So you block out the 5 minutes before and block out the 5 minutes after, and that's how you could stop trading from happening. So I guess finish off how to use these BloodHound templates. So actually, let me close out of the strategy, and let me go back into BloodHound here. So remember, if I look at the logic template, remember, I made this end of day logic like so, and actually I changed the outputs here. Let me put the outputs back correctly there. So if I squish up my chart, right, so I can see when there's no output here, this is the trading day, and this time session solver is set up, right? Remember, I set it up backwards, so that we get an output when it's not in session. So we can see that it's the output. We're getting the output when the market is closed after hours here. Right, so we can use this long and short signal in Raven to close out any open positions. So I'm going to show you how to use this inside of Raven here. Let's close that out. So I go back into my strategy window. So I add Raven to the strategy, and up at the top here, right, we have the templates. So this is where I load the BloodHound template. So you see, this is BloodHound's interface. I can go click on File, and I can load today's template. And if I look at the logic, right, there's our end of day logic right there. So I know this is the correct BloodHound template. And right, so you would put your entry signals in here. You could specify your entry signals in here. However, let's see, I did not, let's see, find Wicks. Yeah, I guess I can use this find Wicks template as my entry signals. And for my exits, I can use this end of day template. And so using this end of day in the exit logic will tell Raven, right, to close out your positions, when the market is closed, or basically based on how you have that time session solver set up. So that's how you would use that. So all right, yeah. So Tom would like to see again an example of using the BackTestRenko for backtesting. So let me switch my chart over to the BackTestRenko. All right, and let's see. I'm going to turn wave mode on at first, and let's see, reversal size 2. Let's set that to 1. I'm going to build 2 charts side by side. So I'm going to prepare this chart as another BackTestRenko, but in a different mode. So let me just get this chart cleaned up. And alright, so this chart on the right, I have wave mode turned on, and I can tell that because the bar size, the brick size of the bars are all uniform. See how they're all the same length on the brick size? So in this one, I'm going to turn wave mode off. And so with it off, this is for back testing. And let's see, let me turn my global crosshairs on. Alright, so you can see, that these charts are synchronizing, but now you can see there's a clear, distinct difference. So the chart on the left, you'll notice that the opening price is different on all the bars. They're not uniform anymore. So with wave mode turned off, this is showing the actual opening price of the bar. Whereas the chart on the right, with the chart on the right here, you can see that all of these bars have a modified opening price. Alright, so just kind of mark the modified opening price versus the chart on the left here. So let me show you a good example. So if we look at this bar here, and I guess I'll get rid of those other diamonds. Right, so you can see my crosshairs are synchronized on the same bar, but notice how there's a drastic difference in the opening price. Alright, so with this wave mode turned on, and also with this wave mode turned on, right, the chart that's on the right here, this you'll notice that these look like the pro Renkos. And so essentially, right, the pro Renkos have this modified opening price as well. The chart on the left, right, we can see the opening price is way up here. So if you look at where my cursor is on the chart, on the right chart, right, look how much higher my cursor is on the bar on the right chart. So the left chart with wave mode turned off, it's showing the correct opening price. So this this allows more accurate backtesting results when this happens. Right? So NinjaTrader, when you're backtesting on historical data, right, on static bars historically, the only data that NinjaTrader has to assume your entry price, so when you're backtesting and you're entering into the market, the only data that Ninja has to assume where your entry price is the open of the bar. Alright, so when a bar closes, the opening price of the next bar is the only data that NinjaTrader has to assume or to approximate where your entry price would be. Right, so having this opening price be as accurate as possible is important for backtesting. Right, so when you're backtesting on these static bars, these historical bars, you'll never know where the true bid and ask price was. All you know is where a trade took place, and so you have to assume that this opening price is near it, as close as possible to where the bid and ask is, right? So clearly the open price is either at the bid or the ask, but you don't know which one. So it's as close as possible. So if you're using bars that have a modified opening price, right, then clearly you know that the bid and ask was not way down here in real life trading, right? The bid and ask was realistically somewhere up here. So I'm just trying to synchronize this red diamond with the other chart. Right, so now if you look at my crosshairs, you can see the red diamonds are at approximately the same price. Right, so you can see this huge difference in price, you can see this huge difference in the opening price of these bars. So that's why this BackTestRenko was created, was so that you could get a more accurate opening price for backtesting, so you can get a more accurate backtest result. Hope that addresses Tom's question there. All right, so Mike is asking, what solver would I use for the ATR trailing stop for an exit? Mike, let's see. Let me answer two questions with one answer here. Let's see. Yeah. So Sarahi asked about are these workshop videos being recorded, and yes, they are. I told him I would get back to his question. The best place to look for these workshop videos is on YouTube, because YouTube has a great search tool to find videos. So we can use this search term here to find these recorded workshops and to search through all of the recorded workshops. So if I go to YouTube, go into YouTube there, and I can put in the search term BloodHound, and let's see. So for Mike, you want to look for an exit. Let's see. So I believe that'll find the video there, Mike, that you're looking for. All right. So there's a couple here on the top, but I think, Mike, the one that you want is this BloodHound Workshop Exit Strategies. Let me see if let me read the description here. So if I open up the description, yeah, so this workshop demonstrates various exit conditions and logic. Yeah, so this goes through a bunch of different examples of using indicators that, indicators that have like an ATR based trailing stop. So Mike, this workshop video will give you all kinds of examples to use so that you could build your own exit logic. But to answer your question directly, Mike is asking, what solver would I use? So the solver that you would use, let me pull up BloodHound here. So Mike, the solver you would use is the comparison solver. So what you're doing is you'll be comparing the closing price, or I don't know, whatever price you want to use, but I think typically most people will use the closing price. So you can set this, you can set indicator A right to the closing price, so that's like a little shortcut there for you. And let me just get through that. My Ninja's running a little slow because of these Renko bars. When you're using these Renko bars, it can build a lot of bars on your chart. So these Renko bars can just, they can add thousands of bars on your chart per day, especially when you use like a one-tick increment. So let me let me change this to a 2-tick increment. I'm building the bars, and that'll cut the number of bars in half and speed things up a little bit. Alright, so anyways, back to Mike's question. So this comparison solver, and then so we'd be comparing the closing price to whatever the indicator is that you're using for your ATR stop. Right, so you can just go in here and pick your indicator for your ATR stop, and essentially see. Let's see, Mike, do you have an indicator name for me to use here? Let's see. Just looking through the comments to see if Mike had given me an indicator to use. Oh, so Mike got something off of Big Mike's forum. So okay, I think something that kind of comes with NinjaTrader. Let's see. I've got so many indicators that it's kind of hard to remember which ones come with NinjaTrader and which ones don't. But I think the TS Super Trend. I think this one comes with NinjaTrader. I'm not positive, but I'll just use this as an example here. Right, so this TS Super Trend. Let's see. So for in an uptrend, I would want to get a short signal. Actually, let's see. Actually, I think that, yeah, the TS Super Trend is kind of a bad example because it uses two different plots. It's kind of a bad example, but essentially the concept is the same, right? So you'll use the plot, use the plot that represents the ATR, trailing stop, and compare that to the closing price, and that would create your exit signal. So keep in mind, when you're building an exit logic, so let's say if we're long here, you're in a long trade. To exit a long trade, you want BloodHound to give you a short output, right? So you want a short signal to exit a long trade. All right, so you want the opposite signal from BloodHound to exit a position. So, but Mike, this workshop video here will give you plenty of examples and walk you through a lot more detail than what I'm giving you here today. So, and also, Mike and anybody else, when you're watching these videos, if you would like the workshop or the BloodHound file that was built in these workshops, all you need to do is give me the date. So I just need to know the date of when this workshop took place. So if you watch the very beginning title, it'll show you the date. So right here, coming next, I think it's 20 seconds in, so right there. So Mike, if you would like the BloodHound workshop for this, I want you to send me an email. Let's cancel that. Let's see where we go. So Mike, send an email in to support@sharkindicators.com and just ask me, for the workshop BloodHound file for this date, right? June 21st and 2013. And I will attach that for you. And you'll have the BloodHound file that goes along with this video. So, all right. So Peter is asking, can you measure fib values if you have a corresponding indicator? Yes, Peter. So that's what it takes, right? So remember, BloodHound uses your indicator values to build these various conditions. So if you have an indicator that calculates out, the fib values that you want to use, that's what is needed. And to give you some examples of what solver you would want to use with a fib type indicator, I don't know of indicators off the top of my head that throw out fib values, but what I would do, let's see, how about if I switch this over to a 2-minute chart just to build something simple. And I'm going to use, how about if I'll use Ninja's pivot indicator to give an example. One thing to note, NinjaTrader is aware that with their pivot indicators, when you use the daily, let's see, pivot type, let me make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Yeah, so NinjaTrader is aware that there's an internal issue that if you're using this pivot indicator inside of a strategy or another indicator, in other words, like BloodHound, right? So BloodHound's an indicator. So if you're using this pivot indicator inside of another indicator, such as BloodHound, you can't use daily bars. There's an internal issue where NinjaTrader doesn't build these daily bars on time, and there's an issue with the timing of it. So sometimes these daily bars are built too late, and therefore the pivot indicator doesn't have the correct values, or the pivot indicator just doesn't have the daily bar data to calculate its pivots from. So if you're going to use the pivot indicator, you have to use calculate from intraday data. So we're going to switch that over. Let's see, let me change this to 50. Peter, I'm just going to use this pivot indicator to kind of mimic, hopefully mimic what your fib indicator is doing, since I don't have a fib indicator loaded up here. Alright, so Peter, I'm just kind of assuming that your fib indicator throws some lines up here, or your fib indicator throws lines up on your chart much like a pivot indicator would. So a couple of solvers that you can use would be, let's see, let me make a new logic template. So I'll just call this a fib example. So I'm going to drop a brand new support resistance solver onto the board. So this might be the first, the first solver that you may want to use. Or if you're only interested in looking at one of the fib numbers, then you may want to use the comparison solver. So let me look at the comparison solver first. And so I'll give you an example here. So this is actually looking at the pivot, and what we'll try and detect is the PP line. And we'll look at when the closing price gets within a certain range of the PP line on the pivot. So I need to go in and set indicator A to my pivot indicator. And I need to go in and set the indicator values parameters the same. So we're going to switch this to calculate from intraday data. And so with the comparison solver, I'm going to try and detect when price is going to, is hitting the PP line. And so I'm going to look to see if the closing price gets within 5 ticks of the PP line. So I'm going to set both the large and the small amount to 5 ticks. And next, what I need to do is I need to change all of my outputs. So I don't want to use these two outputs here. So let me set these to 0. What we do want to use is we want to use this neutral area. Oop, let me set this guy to 0. There we go. So we're going to use this neutral area. And right, so now you can see on the chart here. I'll expand this out now. And so what we're detecting is when the closing price, gets within 5 ticks above or below the PP line. So if you're looking for price to get, say, within, so many ticks of the 50% Fibonacci retracement, most likely that's probably what you're trying to find. I'm just making an assumption here. So that's how you would do that. And so in this example, we're just getting both a long and a short output, and then you can determine with other solvers, whether you want a long output or a short output. So say like if you're using your Fibonacci indicator, right? You're trying to figure out when price, hits one of your Fibonacci values, and you want to exit your trade at that point. This would work great for that. So this long and short output would exit any position. So this long and short output, if you use this in an exit logic in Raven, it would exit, both a long or a short position. It would exit either one, since we have both a long and a short output. All right, so this could be used in an exit template in Raven to basically exit the trade when price got, within 5 ticks of the PP line. So this would be kind of a similar example, I'm assuming, of how you would want to use this, Peter. So let me show you real quick on the support resistance solver how we could use that and what the differences are. So if you're wanting to know when price gets within a certain distance of your Fibonacci values, we're going to use tailwind mode here. And you're going to use an indicator. So we'll set this to true. And you see it opens up this new section here. So this allows you to set your indicator up. So let me switch this over to the pivot indicator. And I need to set my parameters up the same. So I need to use intraday data. And so here's the big difference that the support resistance solver has. Right? It has this select all. So this is the only indicator or solver where you can select all of the plots, right? See, I have all the plots selected. So I can find out when price gets within any of these values here. Or I can say, you know what, I'm only interested in the PP line R1 and S1. So I don't care about the R1, I don't care about the R2, the R3 or the R or the S3. So I can turn those plots off, and so the solver would only be looking at these three different plots. So let's just say that's what I want to look at. And the next thing I need to set up is to determine how close do I need price to get to these plot values before I get a signal. So instead of using an ATR, I'm going to switch this over to ticks. It's just a little easier to see ticks. Now the ideal distance and the maximum distance can sets up the fuzzy logic part of BloodHound, right? So you can set up, so you can use the fuzzy logic using these two distances. But for now, how about if I just look for 3 ticks? And so I'm going to set these both to 3 ticks, so that way I'm not using the fuzzy logic part. It kind of sets it up for a digital type output. And oh, let's see, here's another thing that is helpful to turn off. This must agree with. Yeah, there we go. So you'll notice under the mode here, under this mode setting, there's this must agree with swing trend. Typically you'll want to turn that off, and then you'll see the results that you want. So if you want to see more detail of how the support resistance solver works, then you can watch the video on the documentation page. So to see, right, so there's a lot more settings here that I'm not covering today, but if you go to the documentation, right, so in BloodHound's interface you can click on help and click on documentation, and it'll open up your web browser, and I can scroll down here. So under this BloodHound reference section, right, I can see all the different solvers here, and so I can click on the support resistance solver, and so there's the written documentation for it, but also near the bottom is a video that'll go into depth a lot more, and there's also some examples here as well that you can play around with. So, but anyway, so you can kind of see the results here. So as price comes up to the R1 line and it's below the R1 line, right, it's giving us a short signal, and you can see as price moves down down towards the PP line, right, we can see it's giving us a long signal. So kind of what the tailwind mode, kind of like its basic function use for is that it's kind of looking for bounce trades. So you can see right here, this was like a perfect short bounce trade off of the R1, and this was a perfect bounce trade off of the PP line to go long. So that's kind of what tailwind, kind of the core function, what tailwind is used for. And you can see that, so with the support resistance solver, I'm able to use one solver to analyze several different plots at the same time with one solver. So if you're using the comparison solver, right, the comparison solver is only going to look at one plot at a time. So if you're using, the 50% retracement on a Fibonacci, and you want to use the, what's the other one, the 62% or 63%, I believe, or maybe the 75% retracement, then you would need to use a secondary comparison solver to set it up for the 75% retracement, or however you're using that, Peter. All right. Let's see. All right. So I think I addressed Peter's question there, and so Peter's second question: do we have access to the training session templates? And so yeah. So as I explained earlier, Peter, just send me an email just send an email in here to support@sharkindicators.com and just tell me the date of the workshop, and I'll send these templates to you. All right, Al's got a question here. How would you construct a template that looks to see if several indicators are within the same neighborhood, so to speak, in order to generate a signal? Let's see, these indicators would be independent on one another. All right, Al, yeah, that's an easy one there. So, let's see, let me, so I have a pivot indicator on my chart, and let me add like a moving average. So, how about if I just add an SMA to my chart? 14 period. Sounds good to me. And let's see if the 14 period gets within. Bingo. Okay. So let's look for this. Let's say we're going to look for when our SMA gets within a certain distance or a certain range of the R1 there. And I'll create a new logic here. So let's see, SMA to the pivot. I want to give this a better name here. So let's see, if the SMA within range of the, let's see, in this case it'll be the R1 pivot. Alright, so we're going to use a comparison solver. So once again, we're looking at the SMA and the R1, and we're comparing them to each other to see when they get within a certain range of each other. Alright, so I'll connect my solver up, and oh, I grabbed the wrong solver here. Let me delete that off the list. So I want the comparison solver. There we go. Alright, so I'll give this a name, the SMA to the R1 pivot. Yeah, I don't think it really matters which indicator you put in indicator A or indicator B. Not in the way that we're using this comparison solver. Right, so I'll just I'll put the pivot indicator in indicator A. And I need to set my parameters up to match what's on the chart. And we're interested in R1. Now down here in indicator B, SMA 14, great, that's already set up for us, so we're looking at the SMA 14. So now a couple of things that we need to set up is, we need to determine, how many ticks are we looking for these guys to get in proximity to each other. So let me take a quick little measurement here. So 95. So it looks like these are 3 ticks away from each other. So how about if I just put 4 ticks in just for good measure? 4 ticks. And we're going to want to clear out all the outputs. So we're going to set all the output values to 0. And what we're going to use is this neutral zone area. So let me get this to update. So if you look at the description here, right? So A is the pivot line and B is the SMA 14. So if the pivot line is greater than the SMA 14 by 4 ticks, right, we have this zone, and we have a lower zone, which is if the pivot line is less than the SMA 14 by 4 ticks. And so in between that, right, so we have this zone in between. And so we'll use this output here, this neutral output, that kind of creates this zone in between. And so if we set the long and the short to 1 in this neutral zone, so now we get this output here that tells us when one indicator, you know, gets into a certain proximity to the other indicator plot. So that's how you would do that to determine when right, two indicator plots, or you know, two values, two data sets are within a certain range of each other. Is just like that. And of course, you know, you can use other values besides ticks. You know, if you wanted to factor in market volatility, you could use the ATR, you know, and look for the indicators to be within, you know, a certain ATR of each other, and that kind of factors in volatility. So, but it's, for these workshops, I like to use ticks because it's easy. It's easy to visually see, you know, 4 ticks, 3 ticks. It's not easy to see one ATR, since the ATR values are always changing, right, based on how volatile the bars are. So, okay. Well, Al, I hope that addresses your question. And so with that, I'm going to wrap this up, guys.